It's not going to be just humans colonizing space. It's going to be life moving out from the Earth, moving into its kingdom, and the kingdom of life, of course, is going to be the universe.
The Interplanetary Podcast. The exploration of space for the benefit of all mankind. Your hosts here in London, Matthew Russell and Jamie Franklin.
Holy moly.
Do you know who that was, Jamie?
I do know who that was, and I'm very excited that we're talking about him. It's Freeman John Dyson.
Freeman Dyson, who unfortunately died this week.
He died this week. Rest in
Pretty old,
peace.
though. Pretty old. He had a good innings,
Absolutely
but he
did.
apparently he had a fall and didn't quite recover. So,
Yeah, bless him. Well, what an incredible legacy.
do you want to talk about him?
Yes, please.
You do know he was English, don't you?
I do, yeah. A lot of people think he's American, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, he moved to America as a sort of young adult. But yeah, no, born and educated here in good old Blighty.
Good old Blight.
Went to Cambridge University, of course.
Of course.
Bit of a high flyer. Everyone loved him. But ever since the age of 4, he was sort of buried in encyclopedias and things like that. So at the age of 4, he calculated the number of atoms in the sun. Is that the sort of thing you were doing at the age of 4?
I do not think so. I mean, you know what I was doing at 21, let alone 4.
So, yeah, one thing that he did that actually he did similar things later in life, but yeah, during the war, the Second World War, he developed analytical methods for calculating the ideal density for bomber formations to bomb German targets.
Wow.
So yes, he was using his maths brain in war, and he also did things like remove gun turrets from the bombers because they would go slower, even though you would have the ability to shoot down your enemy. It made you slower. So in actual fact, he showed the maths that you were losing planes rather than keeping planes. So,
God damn.
very important stuff.
Very important indeed.
I love this Stephen. So while he was at Trinity Cambridge, he had a colleague, the genius that is Stephen Weinberg. He described him as this, and I think this probably is just about the best quote for Freeman Dyson you could have. I have the sense that when consensus is forming like ice hardening on a lake, Dyson will do his best to chip at that ice.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that sums him up, really.
I mean, what else would you want said about you if that's the way you were? Brilliant.
Now, one thing I didn't realise is just how important his relationship with Richard Feynman was.
I didn't know this.
No, so in 1947, when he first moved to America, to Cornell University, he met a very young Richard Feynman, who he's clearly absolutely enamoured by. I was reading some of his letters last night about Richard Feynman and to Richard Feynman. He basically just describes Richard Feynman as this, unbelievably excitable character who's just working through problems, and he sort of says of him that he's never seen someone work out so many problems in such short a time. It's just like incredible. So he's totally amazed by Richard Feynman, and Richard Feynman, of course, has developed these Feynman diagrams, but it's actually Freeman Dyson who works on Feynman diagrams because he can see the importance, but everyone else is just ignoring it, despite Feynman's kind of hard push to sell his diagrams. He manages to put it in simpler terms, but also show that it's equivalent to the work of some other scientists, and actually brings them all together. And those 3 scientists go on to win the Nobel Prize. It's actually Dyson's work that popularizes Feynman's work, and the Dyson's version of it was actually more popular for a bit. So they were known as Dyson graphs rather than Feynman diagrams for a bit.
God, that's nuts. I had no idea.
He's a very important character just in terms of his contribution to physics and maths, but of course there's so much more to Dyson than that. In fact, it's one of the reasons he puts down for why he didn't get a Nobel Prize himself, because a lot of people are saying, how on earth is Freeman Dyson managed to go through life without getting a Nobel Prize? Dyson himself said this. He goes, I think it's almost true, without exception. If we want to win a Nobel Prize, you should have a long attention span, get hold of some deep and important problem, and stay with it for 10 years. That wasn't my style.
I like it.
Yes, he got involved in all sorts of things. So he became a US citizen after returning from Birmingham University, which he had a little stint at for a bit, went back to Cornell and then on to Princeton. And because he proved Oppenheimer wrong, Oppenheimer essentially gave him a lifelong seat at Princeton University, which he did actually stay there for pretty much his entire career. He worked on nuclear rockets, the Orion program, and he hoped that would put men on Mars by 1965. So his timeline's even more ridiculous than Musk's. He even thought that men would get to Saturn by 1970. But he scuppered the project kind of himself by being part of the panel that came up with the partial test ban on nuclear weapons, which of course meant that they could only test nuclear weapons underground, which meant that you couldn't do the testing for Orion that obviously needed to be above ground. So that's the end.
Oh damn!
He worked for a mysterious military or defense group called Jason, Jason, for a long time, doing lots of stuff, including climate things. Now, it's the climate thing I think that I'm going to have to veer away from Dyson. I do not agree with a lot of his views on climate change. But he worked for the Space Studies Institute, which of course was Gerard O'Neill's club. But here's another curious thing that he wrote once. He wrote, ESP is real, but cannot be tested with the clumsy tools of science.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, again, it's Dyson doing his best to chip at the ice. Which when it comes to climate science has an extra layer of irony in there. I think it's almost a really good example of someone who's exceptional at maths and physics, but may not actually fully understand the scientific method. I don't know. I know that that's absolutely ridiculous of someone like me to be sitting here having a go at Freeman Dyson, but it does seem a little bit ridiculous. Someone could say ESP is real, despite there being absolutely no evidence for it whatsoever.
Yeah, that does seem to be counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? It's a bit weird. But of course, Dyson gave his name to loads and loads and loads of stuff, like the Dyson sphere. You've heard of the Dyson sphere, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Hell yeah. But I bet have you heard of the Dyson tree?
No, not the tree.
That's a genetically engineered plant that grows inside a comet to help humans living inside the hollowed out comet travel inside it as a kind of habitat in the outer solar system.
That's deep.
Yes, he also proposed that if you were sort of wandering around Jupiter, it's not entirely unrealistic to see frozen fish just floating around, because he's saying one of the easiest ways, instead of drilling down into Europa, for example, to see if there was life, is
don't get me started on that.
No, well, wait for a big impact, and some of that life that's in the water should be sprayed out by that impact and instantly frozen in the vastness of space, kept pristine. So there should be evidence of the life in the frozen water around in one of Jupiter's rings, for example. Might be fish, giant fish. They might find a frozen whale up there, Jamie, or a frozen squid.
My beloved whalians. Oh, well, I mean, it's quite an image.
So yeah, there's some there's some other cool things like the Dyson's Eternal Intelligence, which I actually first heard about, I think, on Isaac Arthur. It's such a cool scenario, the Dyson scenario, where basically near the end of the universe, where the universe is suffering from heat death, instead of like panicking, what a immortal group of intelligent beings could do is basically slow down their perception of time so that each billionth of a second seemed like a year, for example. And so you could stretch out the last few years of the universe and make them seem like they go on forever.
But Matt, who wants to live forever? Freddie Mercury once sang.
Who dares to live forever, Jamie?
Oh.
But he may have, get this, he may have averted war, nuclear war in Vietnam. So a lot of the US generals were saying, well, why don't we just chuck in a nuke every now and then? That should put a cat amongst the pigeons somewhat. And he was a bit horrified, so he wrote a paper saying exactly why you shouldn't do that, outlining the maths behind it and saying it probably is in no one's interest to chuck nukes into Vietnam. It will be counterproductive.
Bloody hell. I mean, it was a disaster as it was. Can you imagine if they added that? So, yeah, well done, Dyson, for that.
Yeah, so overall, he's an absolute legend with lots of insanely interesting things to do, and he furthered human knowledge immeasurably, and you need mavericks like Dyson in the system, don't you? To always
absolutely do.
Chipping at the ice, stopping consensus becoming ideology. I think that's the best way of seeing it. So really I absolutely love Freeman Dyson, despite his rather dubious beliefs on certain subjects.
Well, we all have our little things, don't we?
Yeah. Well, absolutely, Jamie.
I mean, if we can all be inspired to chip away at the ice, then that's a bloody good thing.
Yeah, if we could all be a little bit more like Dyson, then that'd be great. I think it would be great. He's obviously a very lovely chap as well. Very, very modest.
Yes.
And self-effacing, yeah. It's what come across in his letters about Feynman. It was very good. Do you know whose birthday it is today, as the podcast comes out? Born in 1937, the great Valentina Tereshkova.
First woman in space?
The first woman in space.
Oh.
Still the only solo female spacefarer as well.
OMG. Well, happy birthday.
Yeah, I saw the Vostok 6 capsule when it was at the Science Museum. Back in 2016 at the Cosmonauts exhibition. Very excited I was. In fact, literally shaking when I was seeing it. Science Museum, Jamie, we can now spread the news. 25th of March. Everyone should come down.
5th of March. Put it in your diaries. We'll be there.
Come down and have a little chat with us at the Interplanetary podcast stall.
We are going to do a live show. We'll have our little stall. We might even have some... What will we have there, Matt? I mean, dare I ask, are we going to have any merch?
Oh, merch. Now that is... If I can order the merch in time and it can arrive
just edit
in time.
this out if that's impossible.
Well, no. I'll try and get some interplanetary mugs. We can definitely get them here on time. So yes, some interplanetary mugs will definitely be available. There's no point in me getting merch because you need all the different sizes and different
Well, what
styles.
other reason do you need to come down to the Science Museum than the chance of having an interplanetary mug?
And not only that, a chance of being on the show. If you are a Patreon, definitely come down because we'll definitely have you on the show.
Oh my
we'll definitely
God,
have a little chat with you.
Please do.
So all the Spodcats, please come down, and really hope to see you because there's going to be space rocks are going to be there. There's loads of really really exciting stuff, including about 3 or 4 of our previous guests are coming down as well. So it's going to be absolutely amazing.
Definitely, the gang's all going to be there. So
I'm
involved.
Really excited. 25th of March. See you in a couple of weeks. Actually, here's something really cool about Valentina Tereshkova. She married a cosmonaut from Vostok 3 the third Russian in space.
Aye.
And they had a daughter, Elena Andrianova Nikolaeva Tereshkova.
Wow.
And she's the first person to have a mother and a father who had travelled into space. It's a bit annoying, isn't it, if you're a kid? Yeah,
That's
what,
genius.
Mum, Dad, what have you done? Well, we have been into space.
Yeah, both of us.
Both of us.
So eat
in
your
a time
greens.
where virtually no one has been into space.
Wow.
Do you know what Wednesday was, Jamie? Was the 50th anniversary of Britain's rocket, the Black Arrow, the second Black Arrow, that successfully achieved a suborbital flight.
That's a good name as well, isn't it? Black Arrow.
The Black Arrow.
Something out of Lord of the Rings or something.
To the last space conference I went to, I talked to Black Arrow, which is going to be a sea launch rocket.
Oh, really?
Which, yeah.
Oh,
I've got a space conference today where I shall be talking about the subject of Space Word of the Week.
Here we go.
Space manufacturing.
2 words of the week.
Do you want a little bit of history about space manufacturing?
Yes, please.
We've talked about this on the show before, because I think we talked about Georgy Shonin as an astronaut of the week. And just a little bit over 50 years ago, Georgy Shonin and Valery Gubersov were an unhappy crew. Remember, we were saying that they were in their Soyuz 6 capsule. They'd failed to video Soyuz 7 and 8 dock, because that was the whole purpose of the flight, was them to video the other 2 Soyuz spacecraft docking. And this is only a short while after the Americans had managed to land on the moon. So the Russians had let their lead in the space race suddenly evaporate away. They're a little bit depressed, and they're sitting back there, and they're about to do something very significant, but almost totally catastrophic. I mean, this is almost unbelievable. So Valery Gubersov, he's reached for some of his welding equipment to carry out an experiment, trying out various welding techniques and how space affects welding. And during one of the welds, he almost burnt right through the hull of the ship.
Yeah, that would have done it.
Which would have been pretty bad news, being that they weren't wearing spacesuits at the time. That, however, could be considered a monumental leap in mankind's history, because for some, that is the first ever piece of space manufacturing.
Totally is.
If that Soyuz was the first workshop, then Skylab, that went up in 1973, also spent quite a lot of time, about 4 working days, devoted to space manufacturing. So welding, using a space furnace, growing crystals, melting metal, and igniting things. So setting fire to things and seeing how flame works in space.
That would terrify me if I was up there. It's like, oh,
Yes.
Jamie, just pass me that Bunsen burner, would you?
Yeah, it's a little bit scary, isn't it? The Space Studies Institute, again, remember we were saying that Freeman Dyson was a big part of the Space Studies Institute. Well, they, right early on, when they first were founded in 1977, started taking space manufacturing really seriously and had a biannual conference on the subject alone from 1977 onwards. So it's starting to get a little bit serious. ESA pioneered the Space Lab, which of course went up in the shuttle, in the cargo bay of the shuttle, which then went on to become, well, basically that was the basis for things like the Columbus module of the ISS, which of course we've walked inside the mock-up of when we went to
Germany.
Yeah, no, when we
was
went
it
to
Holland?
Yeah, Holland. We walked through the ATV mock-up when we were in Germany, which actually is based on the same. It's very similar to Space Lab as well. So all those things are actually all connected. Yeah. So Columbus has the material science laboratory on board and the fluid science laboratory. So those are both really important when it comes to studying space manufacture. But there are a couple of commercial ventures, and we've talked about one of them before, Made in Space, when I mentioned their Z-Blan fiber optics. So Z-Blan is a type of fiber optic cable that's incredibly more efficient than normal fiber optic cable, but you have to make it in 0G. So it's likely that when Made in Space made their Z-Blan fiber optic cable on the International Space Station and then sold it, that is the first example of a commercial space manufacture. So that has to go down in history.
Definitely has to.
Probably talk about this in more detail on another show, and that's their Archinaut spacecraft, which is basically the backbone of in-space production for making large telescopes, repurposing spacecraft, robotic assembly of new space stations, that kind of stuff. So they're ground testing that, and they expect that to go up in 2022 on an Electron rocket. So a fully commercial new space endeavor there. But there's also another company called Tethers Unlimited that has a refabricator aboard the ISS. Basically, that takes all the recycled plastic and turns it into filaments for the 3D printer. And
that's clever.
Yeah, that is clever, isn't it? And they're also testing a similar technologies for building in space as well. So it seems that Tethers Unlimited and Made in Space are having a little race about who can be the first, proper commercial company in space manufacturing.
Well, Matt, I mean, healthy competition, Lennon and McCartney. I'm just saying.
Oh, absolutely. So, Jamie, why would you want to build in space?
Well, various reasons. Should we go through them?
Yeah, hit me.
I mean, space offers unique environments that can allow for certain industrial processes that can't be done on Earth, Matthew. I mean, surely you know this.
Here's a little bit of a downside. If you want the large infrastructure in space, you have to get all the materials up there, right? So that's a little bit expensive.
How much are we talking?
Currently, Elon Musk reckons it's about £2,500 per kilogram on Falcon 9.
Well, that's not too bad.
No. But one thing you can do in space is get the raw materials from things like asteroids and the moon at a lower price. So that's something we'll have a look at in a second.
Okay.
But here's a good one, Jamie. You could do really dangerous things in space that you wouldn't really want to do on Earth in case you damage the environment.
Okay.
This is the element of space manufacturing that I think Jeff Bezos is very, keen on as a follower of Gerard O'Neill. Which I totally dig, but it's all about how you actually make this happen. It's the transition from low-scale manufacturing at high prices to higher volumes at lower prices. It's how do you make that transition?
Very true.
So it's you have to have enormous capitalization costs, so governments have to get involved. But at the moment, it's the cost of getting stuff up there. So as I said, it's £2,500 on a Falcon 9 to get a kilogram, a bag of sugar, up into space. So
Matt, I've just while you've been talking there, I was curious to think, I wonder how many kilograms I weigh. And so I weigh about 10 stone, I think.
About 75 70 odd.
That's 60, just over 63 kg. So that's
Really?
150. Wow, just under 158k to send me up. Elon, if you're listening, I mean that's small change for you, mate.
Yeah, it's significantly cheaper to get you up than it is to get me up.
Oh, well, I mean, just and I could do so much more than you, Matt, up there.
The weird thing is, like, that's just going for a wee before you go on your space flight actually saves so much fuel.
Elon would be like, come on, mate, just have a squeeze. But I don't need it, Elon.
By doing a wee on the space station, you're bringing up some water. So it's actually not that big a saving after all.
Yeah. Pros and cons.
Here's the good news for everyone in space manufacturing. Elon Musk has boasted that Starship is an order of magnitude cheaper than Falcon 9 to get stuff into space, which would bring it down to £250 per bag of sugar into space, which is even cheaper than you could ever get a space elevator. So if that is true, the space elevator now is there's just no point talking about it.
Well, I've gone down to 15 grand.
Yeah, so suddenly it's actually quite cheap to get you into space. That might be the price point where all the governments turn around and say, actually, it is now worth spending enormous amounts of capital to get this ball rolling, to get the heavy capitalisation.
Definitely, everyone wins, surely.
Yeah, to start assembling the mining and manufacturing facilities. And once all that's paid for, then once you get production that's economically profitable and self-sustaining, then that's going to be more attractive to entrepreneurs, and that's when the whole thing starts spiraling into a much more likely scenario.
Well, Matt, talking about scenarios, would you like to know about what is special to do with the environment?
Yeah, well,
and when I say environment, I mean specific differences between the properties of materials made in space compared to Earth.
Okay, hit me with some.
All right, so first up, microgravity environment. Control of convection in liquids or gases and the elimination of sedimentation. Diffusion allows otherwise immiscible materials to be intermixed. Enhanced growth of larger, higher quality crystals in solution. What do you think about that?
Well, it's the crystals one that's really, really interesting, because that allows you to look at proteins and grow proteins as larger crystals, which then allows drugs companies to more efficiently test drugs and bring drugs to market. So that's actually enormous, the crystals
That's
one.
big, that one, isn't it?
When you hear about them growing crystals, you think, oh, come on, it's not that big a deal. And then you read about actually why that's important. It's actually very, very cool. Yeah, well, if you grow a protein crystal large enough, you can see how the protein itself is structured, which is very, very exciting. Ultra clean vacuum of space, I should imagine, Jamie, is a particularly useful side effect of being in space. So you can make very, very pure materials. One thing you can't do on Earth anymore is make steel without it containing a little bit of radiation from all those nuclear tests back in the 60s and 70s. But of course, you could do that out in space. You can also do a type of 3D printing called vapor deposition, that you can build up materials layer by layer, free from any defects. So things like graphene might be vapor deposited, for example. So you could build sort of larger structures of graphene.
Well, do you know what else is great, Matt? Surface tension.
Of course.
Causing liquids in microgravity to form perfectly around spheres, which obviously is great for creating consistent spherical components, but not so great for pumping liquids around.
But they must understand that stuff really well by now, with all satellites and all that kind of crazy paper. Yeah. But of course, I tell you what, Jamie, you've also got your extreme heat and cold, which is a problem for some.
Yeah.
A dream for others.
Oh.
Yeah, so you've got sunlight, which is obviously very bright out in space because you haven't got an atmosphere between you and the sun. And that can be focused, and so you can melt stuff. But also you can put things in perpetual shade. And when it is in perpetual shade, it almost goes down to absolute zero. And you can use that temperature gradient, which can be right next to each other, like boiling hot to freezing cold, because there's no atmosphere to retain the heat. And you can use that gradient to make really strong glassy materials like ceramics and things like that.
Super interesting, isn't it? To think about, what the future of construction is in space.
Yeah, well, of course, we've got some pretty significant hurdles. I mean, here's the one that I always think is the biggest one, and that's actually mining itself. So mining raw materials. It's obvious that we can't really start just sending stuff up into space because it's so expensive, so environmentally damaging and stuff. So we really don't want to be doing that. Especially considering all those materials are already in massive abundance out in the solar system. So you've got to go and get these materials. But Jamie, when you think of mining, you're thinking heavy and large, right? You never think of kind of...
Yes, I am thinking of a big drill. Everything's huge.
How do you get these raw materials from space, and do do you go and get the raw materials and bring them back somewhere to a factory, or do you build the factory at the source of the material? So, i.e., do you put a factory in Earth orbit and then get all the raw materials to it, or do you build your massive factory next to an asteroid, for example? So that you've got a couple of choices there.
Interesting. I mean, I guess the question there goes to, are we going to be using whatever that is being built in space, or are we bringing it back to Earth?
Well, yeah, I suppose you could bring the raw materials back to Earth as well, but I think this is more about bringing the raw materials to a factory in space and building stuff in space so that you can use all these advantages that space has, like not in damaging the environment of Earth and all the other ones that we've said. And then you can send those products down to Earth, or maybe to other space stations and stuff like that as you expand out into space. So having a base on the moon, I think, is actually really, really cool. So you've got asteroids at the moon and space junk, of course. You could actually go around using things like empty rocket shells and booster shells and stuff like that as your raw materials. So there could be a one of these in-space manufacturers that goes up and starts cleaning up space junk as a source of raw materials.
That is a good call.
But it's very, very difficult, of course, because it's traveling very fast. It's filthy as well, covered in horrible chemicals like hydrazine and stuff like that. So it's a difficult one. But I think just the fact that it's the double whammy of cleaning up the junk and having, obvious raw materials that you've spent a lot of money getting into space in the first place, it does seem worthwhile going to grab it as long as you've got the infrastructure to deal with it.
I wish you'd clean up your junk sometimes.
Well, I keep my house reasonably tidy, Jamie. Power sources, of course, is a difficult one. Do you go with solar or nuclear? Which one are you going to go with?
I'm going to go with solar.
Yeah, I mean, there is. I suppose if you're near enough the sun, you can build, especially if you can build solar panels from in-space resources. So if you can work a way of just grinding up an asteroid or grinding up moon regolith into solar panels, then you're away. That's a big potential thing there, right there, isn't it?
Who's grinding up?
Your gases, your hydrogens, your oxygens, your liquid oxygens, your liquid hydrogens, your carbon dioxides, carbon monoxides, and all those kind of things, which can be extracted from regolith and things like that. But that might be, some of those things might be better if they are flown up, depending on the efficiency of being able to do it. But yes, we've talked about there's the low-hanging fruit currently for products.
Yes.
Are protein crystals. That seems to be a product that's right there, right now, as something that could
wafers.
Semiconductor wafers, yeah. I like this one, microencapsulation. So you were talking about these little spheres that form in microgravity. Right. But if you have these fine droplets and then they coat themselves in a tiny shell, then you have microencapsulation. Of course, that can be useful for lots and lots of things like medicines and
really cool.
Just rock itself, just going out and getting rock and using it for radiation shielding is a pretty easy, a low-hanging fruit. Water, of course, we've talked about water and the moon being the gas station of the solar system.
Yeah.
So yes, if you can extract water from the lunar regolith. It's a little bit difficult and probably can only be done on a small scale initially. You can even use water as a propellant as well. It's got a very low specific impulse, but not terribly low. So steam rockets might be a thing out in the solar system where you don't need enormous thrust. You just need a little bit of specific impulse that was cheap. So it's also good at radiation shielding as well, water.
Yeah, big time.
Ceramics as well. So ceramics being made out in space, if you can come up with those techniques. Metals, of course, that's not that's a pretty obvious one.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And obviously, one big one is making propellants out in space, so that you have like a gas station up in space that could go around refueling very expensive satellites and things like that. So you could avoid having to keep putting new satellites up and watching your very expensive, totally functioning satellites having to go in a graveyard orbit because they've run out of fuel.
Yeah, it's always a sad thing to see.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, space manufacturing could get to the point where you're building mega structures and space stations and things like that out in space. But I think we've got a long way to go until we get to the Expanse style space manufacturing. But
a few more years.
Space manufacturing is a really, really big deal, and I'm quite surprised more people aren't sort of involved with it and sort of trying to get this done.
Well, thank God we're purveyors of justice for materials in space. And Matt, if you wanted to become a patron, how would you go about it?
Well, yeah, go to patreon.com/interplanetary or go via our website, interplanetary.org.uk. And yes, you'll be able to find all about us and have a look at some of the ways you can support this podcast and pay for my trips, like going down to do space conferences and things.
We're just travellers in this world, aren't we, Matt?
Travellers on a rock hurtling through space at an unimaginable speed.
For those about to rock, we salute you.
Absolutely.
It's my favourite AC/DC song, Matt. Little fact for you.
My favourite is Back in Black.
Well, it's a classic.
It's too good. Jamie, do you want to listen to my E. Scott Lindner interview about his new album, In Flowers Through Space?
Yes, please.
It's not particularly spacey, but I know that spacey people love a bit of music, so it definitely fits in with our space playlist.
It does. We could do with a break from space, so let's talk about music.
Yeah, so here goes. A good day.
Roll it.
I am joined on the podcast by Scott Lindner and Adam Ahuja. Welcome to the podcast, gentlemen. How are you?
We're doing great. Thanks so much for having us.
So whereabouts in the world are you before we start?
Yeah, we're in New York City right now, in Long Island City more specifically, which is in Queens, right outside of Manhattan.
And are you actually in your studio where you recorded the album?
We are. Yeah, we're sitting right in front of the console right now with a laptop up on the console with Skype. So.
Oh, fantastic! What's the name of the studio?
The studio is called Pinch Recording.
I have to say, I've been looking at some of the pictures, and I absolutely love it as a space. You've got some beautiful diffusion panels there as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, we built everything ourselves with our hands. So, we didn't have contractors, so we literally built everything by hand. So it's a handmade recording studio.
Oh, fantastic. So presumably you're both quite geeky when it comes down to maths then, because I know a lot of things like the acoustic properties of diffusions are pretty funny and fun sequence numbers, modulo numbers. So presumably you enjoyed building the acoustic element of your space as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we worked with an acoustic designer named Crossley Acoustics that are based here in Brooklyn. And, they helped us kind of figure out the best dimensions and for the sound. And then within that, building the sound diffusion and the sound absorption and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, absolutely. We have a huge sound diffuser that's above the piano. It's about, I think it's like 11 feet by 5 feet or something like that. And we custom built that specifically to the dimensions of the studio for the sound. So we did some sound, shootouts in the live room with Signal, and we're kind of isolating some of the frequencies that we thought were issues. And then we custom made that to the dimensions of the studio. So I am actually not great at math. I've always been really bad at math, but I surround myself with people who are very good at math. So they're like my calculators.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I mean, it looks a beautiful space.
Thank you.
So yeah, so let's talk about your new album, In Flowers Through Space. Tell us a little bit about how that came about and the kind of overall theme.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the album came out today, February 28th, and it's streaming everywhere. And, I'm very much of the mind of having some sort of a conceptual element to an album can really help sort of form the album and give a real clear direction of where we're headed. So, we came up, myself and Adam, who's sitting next to me, sort of wanted to do something. This is my third album, and the other albums I've done some conceptual elements to it, but this one I wanted to be very specific, and I kind of wanted to figure out a way to use some sort of mathematical equation or construct or something that's widely known as a mathematical sort of fun mathematical thing, that can be used as a way to also promote the album that people are mystified by. And Adam had kind of mentioned the Fibonacci sequence, and I can let him talk about it a little bit more. How did that come about, Adam, with the whole Fibonacci thing?
Well, it's funny, when I first learned about the Fibonacci sequence, it was via the golden ratio, which is an element of the sequence. And when I was a kid, I was a big fan of Bela Fleck and the Flecktones, and they played in our hometown. And at the end of the show, while everyone's packing up the gear, the Future Man was his name. He played the synth drumitar in the band, and the brother Victor Wooten would hang after the show and talk to us. We were teenagers, and he would talk about the golden ratio and how all the proportions on your face and on your body are of that ratio. And we were totally blown away, this cool musician talking about these interesting principles. And then we went to the show a year later, and he did the exact same thing. At the end of he started talking about the golden ratio as if it was like a replay of the year before. And just the fact that it happened twice was kind of funny to us, but it left a long-lasting imprint of what exactly is that. And I just think it was incredible because you could see not only the body, but you could see it in outer space. You could see it in flowers, hence the album title. And it was this idea that permeates through a lot of things. And it just seemed like a great place to apply those mathematical principles to music. And we did that through various different incarnations, whether it was the players, the album, or how we translated the proportions of the ratio to the frequencies and the notes that then translate to scales used in the album and so forth.
So, we applied the Fibonacci sequence to the record in a lot of different ways. The most, I guess, easily understandable and transparent way would be the number of players on each song. So what we did was we attached the number of musicians for the number of the Fibonacci sequence. So it starts with 0. So you'll see on the first track of the record, it's 0. And it's actually just 10 seconds of room noise. So we just recorded in the studio just the sound of the room. The next song has 1 player, which is just piano. The song after that has 1 player because that's the Fibonacci sequence. So that's just a cello player. Then the next one is 2 players, and then 3 players, and then 5 players, 8 players. 13 players, and then the last song on the record, which is this huge, massive thing, has 21 musicians. So we aligned that with the Fibonacci sequence, and that was kind of the start of how we, and then we went deeper and deeper and deeper as to how much we applied the Fibonacci sequence. But that's generally the broad idea of what the album is.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept that tying up maths with another way of displaying a particular sequence. You do realize you're following in the steps of the great Kepler, who was kind of obsessed with these kind of sequences of numbers and kind of accidentally stumbled across his Keplean equations that basically outline how the solar system works. So it's not like these things are necessarily fruitless. Did you do any kind of research into what other musicians and what other people had done before with sequences of numbers, especially the golden ratio?
I didn't do that much research. I mean, I know that the band Tool has used the Fibonacci sequence a lot in a lot of their stuff, but I wanted to keep a fresh perspective on it. I mean, I understood the general idea of the Fibonacci sequence, but again, I'm not that great at math, so for me, it was a much more broad implementation of the sequence. But I also wanted to be very fresh and have my perspective on how that can translate to music. One of my ideas, because I'm very interested in sound and sound waves in particular, and how that translates into notes. One of the ways that we did translate it was we took the actual frequencies of notes and brought to the lowest audible frequency. So, for example, if you take 440 hertz, which is an A, and you take it down to the lowest audible frequency, which I believe ends up being 25, somewhere around there. And we use that as the starting point for the Fibonacci sequence. A partner of mine, Jim, created a Fibonacci calculator via code on the computer, where you would take 25 hertz as a starting point and then make a Fibonacci sequence out of that, and then find the closest musical note that would match up to those hertz. And then that creates a whole Fibonacci sort of scale in a way that you can lie on the piano within those 88 keys. So that was one way, to take sound, specifically, how many cycles a second a wave goes up and down, and translate it into the Fibonacci sequence.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the most interesting ways to give, I think, a lot of the musicians that came in some kind of scale palette to work with. And we found a lot of patterns out of those scales that we could use as tools to compose with, which was really interesting. And we would take those same ratios and apply them to whatever the keys of the songs were. So, for example, in the first piano track, after the track 0 of Silence, is track 1, N1, which is piano. And that one was all about setting that scale. And similar to thinking about harmonics and the way that Eastern musicians use music, and you hear the natural harmonic series occur, and you can compress those tones down into a single scale. We allowed that so-called natural harmonic series of the Fibonacci sequence to take place on the piano on that first track. So what you ended up having was this scale that went root, root, fifth, third, root again. And as it goes up the piano, the next note was somewhere between flat 6 and 6. Then it was somewhere between the third and the fourth. Then it was a flat 2. Then it was a flat 6. Then it was between the fourth and the flat 5th. And then that was literally the length of the piano that would allow that portion of the sequence.
So it's interesting to figure out like how, these notes actually ended up being between notes on the piano. So we, as humans, we created this piano that actually like is somewhat limiting when it comes to that, because we can't get the piano exactly where we wanted it. So that we'd had tape on all the notes that we could sort of use, and Adam would playing both the notes that
right,
the
those half
actual
steps.
note, those half steps where the note actually fell between the notes.
Yeah, sometimes I'll play like a minor second, just play both the notes, or kind of, if it was leaning in the direction of one, I'd play that and kind of hit the other one instead of literally retuning the piano. That would have been an arduous task.
Right. So it's interesting because, there's definitely, you come up with limitations as to how far you can take it, but then you do the best you can to kind of fit it in within that construct.
Yeah, I mean, it's so you didn't attempt doing a non-modern tuning on the instruments that were on the record.
We talked about it.
Mm-hmm. It was in our heads.
It was in our heads, but I'd have to pay the piano tuner a lot more money. But I think it would have been very interesting to go down that route, but it would have, I think, made it almost impossible. I mean, I don't know, because then when we're adding a lot of woodwind instruments, we're adding saxophone, we're adding bassoons, we're adding trombones and synthesizers, and it's like, what is that going to look like when you bring in a saxophone player and you're like, okay, well, this note needs to be,
between 6 and flat 6.
Yeah. So like, we kind of had to run with trying to keep it within those constraints, do the best we could.
Yeah, it's a curious phenomenon. If you actually have a group of singers in a room and they don't have any instruments accompanying them, that they will actually harmonize closer to the not the modern tuning, but actually the harmonic sequence of whatever key you're in. So it's doing it with saxophones and things like that. Yeah, I can see that would.
Oh, that's really, really interesting. Yeah. Actually, I didn't know that about the voice.
Yeah, we have that natural sense to want to go into those natural proportions, those whole number increasing proportions of It's 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5.
It's interesting. How do we end up with these How did we end up with these instruments that are not the natural way?
It's a massive compromise. Yeah, it's
a compromise.
Yeah. I mean, back in Bach's time, you would tune pianos to whatever key you were playing in. And so we've almost lost a whole massive chunk of the musical language because, you could have a piano that was tuned to the harmonic series of D, but play something in the key of G, for example, and it would sound slightly darker and a bit more mysterious. But we've lost that because, of course, we've got a piano that you can play in any key and it sounds just about right in all of them. But it's
right.
Yeah, it's an innovation and also a little bit of a kind of we've lost something there. But I was intrigued to see whether you just hit notes that were nearby or actually went for the whole retune. I would imagine it would make it less accessible though as a piece of music if
that's the debate, Like I mean, I tend to feel like if we had tuned it to it exactly, I feel like maybe there would have struck a chord with people that was like a subconscious thing that just really resonated with people, literally resonated with people, So I mean, again, it's you do the best you can with the tools that we have as humans, I mean, because the whole idea of the Fibonacci sequence and all that kind of stuff is really, it's just our way of analyzing or understanding the universe, and the universe has its own set of laws that we're just trying to kind of fit within. So,
were there any other techniques other than the Fibonacci series that you used, or any other techniques relating to the Fibonacci as little key moments of inspiration for the tracks?
Well, I think the way that we use some of the scale to notice patterns out of that was a further derivation of those harmonic patterns. For example, in track 8, one of the things you notice in the scale is what emerges is major triads a half step apart, which is something that's pretty synonymous in people's perception as perhaps Eastern sounding. So that became really prominent, for example, in track 8. And I think besides the construction of the amount of players per track and the fact that the keys of the track also moved from track to track in the Fibonacci sequence, I think each of us, Scott and myself, we took a little bit different roles in terms of how that happened and what we focused on. So my role was a little more on the side of introducing the musical patterns to the musicians and letting them take that and go somewhere with it. And it affected each musician a little bit differently in how they interpreted that. Some were really on the math side of it and just totally their mind expanded. I remember when Ben Freeman, another pianist, came in here to work, he was, it looked like he was just so excited to integrate this into his playing. And then there were other musicians who didn't know what it was and could pick key notes out of it and combine that with the theme of the track that was intended. And from there, something happened. And I think in retrospect, we looked back at the record and what we ended up seeing was this unintentional impact of the Fibonacci sequence in terms of how the record expands, just like the name is in Flowers Through Space, that something so small like a flower and something so gigantic like a galaxy could inhabit this principle. We saw this happen on the record in terms of its emotional maturity as it moved on, in terms of its just sense of grandiose. And so that was kind of, it had this unintended impact for us, which I think we both saw as like a cool process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think there's something in the fact that you have, when you look at a galaxy or you look at a sunflower, you can, they have an intrinsic beauty to them. Do you think that, does that intrinsic beauty kind of work its way into the music because you've kind of sown the seeds, if you pardon the pun, of the Fibonacci sequence within it? Do you think was that the goal, or was it something that was a pleasant side effect?
Well, I think that it 100% was a pleasant side effect, but that was kind of the idea of the record, was that the Fibonacci sequence and how we see it translates to the human brain as beauty. And we really wanted to see whether that beauty would translate musically. And it 100% did. I mean, it guided us to places where we would have never gone musically had we not let this mathematical construct really guide us, So it 100% translates to beauty, at least in my perception. And so far, with the reception of some of the songs on the record, people do resonate with it, which is really interesting. But that was the goal, I guess, is to see whether that did translate. And it was really, really interesting. And there's so many different ways that you can go nuts and Fibonaccize something. Fibonaccize is a word that I made up while we were doing this to basically say, look, if we found ourselves in a creative place, and we would use the word Fibonaccize to be like, okay, how do we apply the formula to this particular creative decision that we need to make, and you can go really, really deep with it. So, it was really up to each musician and to each person as far as their role within the record as to how we do that. I mean, we went even as far as to record on dates that fell within the Fibonacci sequence. So like the 1st of the month and the 3rd and the 5th and the 8th and the 21st of the month. I mean, we had a session that we had to reschedule because of a health thing, and we had to wait for like 3 weeks to reschedule it
because it was on the 21st. Yeah,
exactly. So, we were really that committed to it, and really just sticking to that to see how it felt. And, ideas would emerge with these songs where, since we waited 3 weeks, we came up with this whole idea. Like one of the ideas was the piñata. I decided to use a piñata and fill the piñata with the form of the song, with index cards, and on the index cards were descriptive words and poems and stuff that we were going to use for inspiration for the song. And on the back of the index cards, I wrote out the Fibonacci sequence, and we just sort of shoved them into a piñata. And then when the band showed up that day, this is for the track 8, so we had 8 musicians in there. They each took turns banging the piñata. When the piñata broke open, the form and all the index cards fell to the ground, and they took those
with flowers.
Yeah, there was flowers in the piñata too. But they took all those forms or all those index cards, flipped them so they see the number of the Fibonacci sequence in the back, and they arranged those based on the Fibonacci, and then flipped them over to see all the inspirational things like, and forms for the song. And we committed to that, taped them into a row, and that was the form that we used for the song itself. So, we really got deep and creative and we really went for it. That can really be heard on song number 8. It was, I think song 8 was like the most fun, creative, most inspired, I think, song that we did on the record.
Did you record all these pieces live, or were there overdubs, and or is it just or is it all live?
It's all live.
So
yeah, it really is.
Mm-hmm. Except for 21 because of how complex it was.
Right. Well, 21. The only reason we did overdubs on 21 is because we didn't physically have the space to fit 21 people.
Yeah.
With all their instruments and stuff, because we had a choir and a string quartet and all that. So on 21, we actually had to bring in a choir on another day to overdub that section of it. But everything else was done live. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful sound that you've got on there. It's so crystal clear. I mean, your studio is obviously a fantastic place. Did you go absolutely crazy and only use certain channels on your desk?
It's funny, what's really interesting is I didn't even think about that aspect of the Fibonacci until very recently, actually. I was thinking about that the other day. I don't know what I was doing, but I was like, wait a second. And I started looking at the frequency points on all the EQs, and I was like, oh my God, there's all these, like I'm looking at it now, like there's all these 3s and 5s and 8s, and you know what I mean? Like in the channels, I could have used channel 3, 5, 8, 21. I mean,
I know. I think,
but to answer your question, I didn't, but I kind of wish I had. But yeah, I mean, maybe in the future I can do something like that.
I just wanted to add there, based on what you were asking earlier as well, that I think for me, something that was really interesting was not being judgmental in terms of how we would implement all of these aspects of the Fibonacci sequence, because at first glance it might seem a little silly, and that's what you were asking earlier, Matthew, sort of how what are all the ways you did this, and sometimes it's something as simple as, oh, let's use this channel and this number, but even if you think, wow, what is that going to do, that inhibits you from appreciating what the result was, because it did impact the result. So it became more of a rule that we used in whatever way, without saying, okay, that sounds good or not. Any way we could put the pattern in there, we just looked for a way,
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Brian Eno, and I remember hearing him in an interview talking about how, like, just putting massive restrictions is actually a lot more creative than having too many options. And so you're kind of stepping into that world, aren't you? By restricting yourself in various bizarre ways, you actually step into a much more creative space.
100%. I completely agree with that. Part of the reason we work the way we do is to kind of create some sort of a map, or like restrictive ways of doing things, so that you can really focus in. So, if you put sort of limitations, you can really kind of focus in on the things that you're allowed to do, and kind of explore the open space within those spaces. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Whereas before you might have just brushed it off. You're like, well, now I got to work with this. Like if we're like, hey, you can only use one microphone for the whole album. Right. That's going to open up all kinds of possibilities that you never would have even thought of.
Yeah.
before.
What if on track 5 you can only have 5 mics or something?
Right. You know what I mean? And you're gonna then move new musicians to different parts of the room. You're gonna have them play differently. Louder and softer in certain parts. All that kind of stuff.
Right.
So absolutely. It's such a great way to work, and such a great way to kind of like discover corners of creativity that you never have seen before. You know?
Yeah, I've always thought it'd be quite good if you had a bunch of really nice mics and you put them in some form of array that was where the measurements all added up to some Fibonacci sequence or golden ratio. And I wonder what that would sound like in terms, because you're obviously hitting all those kind of phase points, but you may be hitting them in a kind of sensitive way.
A spiral.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I'm like so wishing I had gone that far to like set up the mics in those types of positions. That's super interesting.
Yeah.
It's something I'm going to look into actually. Like, there's a lot of math I think involved in that, Yeah. And then how the room reacts to the frequencies and the phase shifting and all that kind of stuff. But that is fascinating. So if you ever do that, definitely hit me up.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to know. I'd love to know.
Yeah, I might.
Something you can.
I might get the students
you can do
to
in
do
a class.
Yeah, exactly. I might get the students to do it. So, were there other kind of overarching influences other than the numbers? So, for example, you've got this flowers through space theme. Was flowers or space or any other external things an influencer on the music?
Space in general is definitely an influence because of the how mystifying it is. Like for me, musically, I'm always trying to achieve a feeling. I'm always trying to achieve something that is grander or grandiose, something that is larger than myself or the musicians, sort of losing yourself in the music, and so I get that sort of celestial feeling from flowers. If you're just kind of sitting on a beautiful sunny day and the breeze is going and you're just kind of sitting there and you can just look at the flowers sort of gently moving. That feeling is what I'm trying to capture in music. So as far as external influences, absolutely. I think the universe, everything that implies creatively is 100% influencing everything that we're doing. The whole idea of the record, the whole way that I make music is literally to try to achieve a feeling of oneness, I guess, with the universe. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
no, absolutely, yeah, absolutely does. Well, we actually have a space playlists that we have as part of the show. In fact, we've got two currently. One that our guests offer tracks. Some of them better than others, and a whole list of ones that we've come up with ourselves as well. Flex Tones actually came on quite recently, which was a bit of a coincidence.
Okay.
But have you got any space related tracks? Any kind of music that you yourself are hugely influenced by or listen to and go, oh my god, that's an amazing. And you're not allowed to have David Bowie or the obvious ones.
Well, I will say that David Bowie is an influence, and I'm going to have to break the rule because there is something absolutely amazing about.
You've worked with David Bowie.
I worked briefly with David Bowie, but there is something absolutely amazing about the celestialness of David Bowie's music, and the last album that he made, Black Star, I think is a beautiful space record. I mean, I'm not talking about the classic Bowie space stuff, but I'm talking about Black Star. This last record is just like a beautiful jazz, like anthem, sort of goodbye to the world, and a launching pad for his wherever he is now. It's like a launching pad for him.
Jason Lindner's on that record, who's kind of maybe like a distant cousin of yours,
which is interesting. Yeah,
maybe that's not a fact.
Jason Lindner's
he kind of looks like
piano
you.
player. Yeah. It's
same last name.
Yeah, people are always wondering if I'm Jason Lindner's brother. But other space records, Tool, I think would be a perfect example of sort of celestial sort of feeling type music. I mean, what do you got?
It's hard. Like space is one of those broader things that are just so influential, I think, as a kid, and just a concept. It's hard for me, to be honest, to really pinpoint like a specific artist that represents space for me. I think it's just something that it's just like a concept, Is that how you feel, or?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely artists that sort of evoke the space feeling. I would say that Radiohead, Kid A, especially the first track on that record, is very celestial to me. Let me see.
I mean, these are good. I'm going to have to check because I don't think Black Star is on the playlist, so that's going straight on. As is Tool. I'm actually enjoying their last album, so
absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, so yeah. I'll try and find a Tool track that stands out. But I know exactly what you mean. There's in some ways, it's always a little bit disappointing if an artist is too didactic about what they're trying to tell you, and sometimes, yes, when it's a little bit more of an ethereal space feel, it's somehow more satisfying, isn't it?
Another one I would mention is Mozart's Requiem.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's
there's something about that feels like transcending or lifting up through the cosmos.
You know what always hit me in that when I was a kid, the band Planet X. I mean, it's much heavier and much more fusion-y, but it was led by Derek Sherinian, a keyboardist, and this stuff was really. It was very spacey to me. I mean, the melodies that he chose, like a lot of use of, Lydian with real sort of like crunchy, polyrhythms underneath it and stuff. It wasn't the celestial sort of smooth. It was more like the rocky, this place is freaking crazy side of space. And I always loved that stuff when I was a kid. So I would put my vote to the first Planet X record, which was Derek Sherinian's. I think it was a solo album of his, like his first one. That's what I would put in there.
Wow.
I'm also going to throw in King Crimson.
Oh yeah.
King Crimson Islands is one of my favorite records, and that is super futuristic or cosmic. Yeah. Because then I was also going to add Future Days, which is another album that hopefully presents itself on the playlist. Future Days, very spacey. Yes.
Wow, yeah. These are great. These are great. The only one I haven't heard, I think, is the Planet X one. So I'll go and check that out. But yeah, you're hitting all the right all my buttons there. That's
great.
So we've obviously got pretty similar taste in music. So is there? So the album comes out today, and have you got any plans of coming over to Europe and promoting it, or what's the best way of consuming the album?
Well, I don't have any plans of coming to Europe, although I'd love to. My brother actually lives in London, but so hopefully I'll make. I was actually born in London too, believe it or not. Yeah, the best way to consume it is to just stream it like anything else. If you go on to all streaming platforms, you can stream the record right now. Actually, it's out. And if you want to see the crazy cast of characters, you can go to Bandcamp, or Tidal will have credits. Bandcamp has a nice list of the credits, because some of these musicians on the record are just outrageous, like really good, just unbelievable New York based sort of jazz guys, and girls.
And you can see everyone visually when the documentary comes out.
Yeah, we also did a full-length documentary, which we just had a screening for last night at the Soho House here in Manhattan. But it's a full-length documentary about the process and about the making of the record, and that's its own beast, that its own art piece that's going to be coming out, which hopefully within the summer or the fall of this year.
Do you know what sort of platforms that will be on?
I don't know yet. Right now, we're going around to different festivals and showing it, and starting to do the screenings and stuff. And then, so it's to be determined.
Well, if you find yourself in Europe, maybe we can have a screening at the college. I think it'd be something that would be really, really cool, and you can give a little speech beforehand.
That would be amazing. I would love that. Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for coming on the show. And
the one thing I'd like to add is, to maybe just plug a little bit, is to check out Infinity Gritty. It's the label that is releasing the record, and this is Adam sitting next to me, Adam Ahuja. He's releasing the record on his label, and you can check out his music as well, Adam Ahuja Music. And other than that, not much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. I'll let you get on with your day and record some cool music.
I'm in Paris right now, Matt, and I'm going for some meetings, but on my way home, back to the hotel, I'm going to listen to In Flowers Through Space.
Nice.
By E. Scott Lindner. So excellent stuff. Cheers for that. And listen to it on all good music services.
Out now.
So that's it.
Spodcats, thanks very much for supporting the show, and you are absolute legends. I've got to apologise to the Spodcats a little bit, Jamie, because
why? What have you done?
We should have kept them more informed about the Science Museum gig, but I didn't want to let it slip just in case it didn't happen, and then it was all out, and then
exactly.
Then I thought
there's still plenty of time,
but we'll make it up to them for the 200th show. The Spodcats are definitely going to be involved. We've got to sort that out. So let's do it.
When's the 200th show, Matt?
I don't know. I think it's sometime in September. I'm going to work it out, and then next week we'll have details.
I think
after I've told
it's going
the Spodcats first.
Yeah. Alrighty, Matt. What are you up to now?
I've got to do a bit of marking, and then I've got to go make my way to this space conference.
Well, you have a good day, and I'll speak to you soon.
Okay then, Jamie. Bye,
Good luck.
guys. Spodcats.
See you soon. Bye.